Hey guys, welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 blueprint tutorial. We're going to work on what I showed off yesterday in the blueprint example with the spikes, how you can change the number of spikes and it, generates all that through the construction script. So just to give you a base idea of what we're going to be working on, here's the example of it. It has the ability right here for a number of spikes. Right now it's set to 1, you can set it to 0 if you want, and then 2, 3, 4, and 10 if you want. And you can have the max number of spikes. You can set that to whatever you want. So if I were to make this 5, it drops it down to 5. It does all these things for us here. We're only going to go over this construction script behavior. I'm not going to do a whole it damages the enemy or anything like that. I just want to give you a base idea on how to create the spike behavior that you're seeing right here. And it's all done through the construction script. This is it right here. This is the entire logic. So what we do essentially, we have the max number of spikes and the number of spikes. We make sure that we can't go above it. Then we have a for loop that then adds the static meshes there and puts them in a particular order within the same distance. And we also scale those two volumes that we see. So we're going to start from semi-scratch. What I have here in my blueprints for this project, it's the same project that I've been working on with Devin. It's with the hazards and everything like that. I was able to create a master hazard blueprint. Has basic functionality here and basic variables that all the other hazards you can call from. And on a base level, it's just the HUD. So what I can do here is just right click on it and create a blueprint based on that. I'll leave its default name BP Hazard Master Child, just because we don't really need to name it anything else besides that. And what we need to do by default is go ahead and add 2 volumes to it. If anything, we don't really need to add the volumes for this purpose, but I'm going to do it anyway because it was interesting to figure out. So the first one, we're just going to go to add component. It's going to be a box collision. And we'll just call this spike damage collision. And we're going to set some properties here for it. These numbers are arbitrary. These numbers work for what I'm doing, so you may need to change numbers depending on what you're doing exactly for this. But what I need to do is set for 47 in the X, and then 33 in the Z, and then 0 in the Y. Then everything else is the same for scale, but the box extent here in the X is going to be 10, Y is going to be 2, and Z is going to be 10. To match the blueprint exactly here, this HUD location, it's going to be 120 so 120 in the X, and then the Z it's going to be about 50. And then we need to add one more box component, box collision. We'll call this spike normal collision. Its location, it's going to be 50 in the X and negative 11 in the Y. For the box extent in the X, it's going to be 25, Y is going to be 2, Z is going to be 32 and remain that way. Alright, so that's done. That's the basic setup. This is all it really looks like if we have no spikes. So now we can go into the construction script. And my construction script may look different than yours just because we are making a child from a parent class, so it does have the parent construction script node. You can ignore that, you don't need it for what this is. So what we're going to do first is create 2 variables. One's going to be called number of spikes. It's going to be an integer. By default, we'll set that to 1. We'll make it public as well. And then the next variable is going to stay an integer variable as well. We call this max number of spikes. We'll also make this a public variable. We'll compile. And we can set max number of spikes. We'll make it like 10. Doesn't really matter right now. So the first thing we need to do for this construction script is do that comparison between the max number of spikes and the number of spikes. So we're going to do number of spikes and max number of spikes, and we're going to check if the number of spikes is greater than the max number. And then with that, we can branch that out. And then if it's true, if that number of spikes is greater than the max number of spikes, we need to set the number of spikes to the max number of spikes. So we're going to do a set, and then we're going to do a copy of max number of spikes. So basically, say for example, the max number of spikes is 10, like we have it, and then if we set the number of spikes here to 11, it's going to then set the number of spikes to 10. It's going to just drop it down to the max it can do. And since they're both public variables, you can change that within the editor. So that's always a good thing. So that's going to be if it's true. If it's false, what we're going to need to do in general is a for loop. We're going to do, for each number of spike that we want to generate, we're going to do a couple actions, like actually drawing the spike. So let's go ahead and right click and do for loop. And there's a couple different for loops here. It's not going to be the array one, it's going to be the float control. So we're going to grab the for loop. And then from the number of spikes set here, we're going to plug that in. But also from the false, we're going to plug that in. Now the first index is going to be the number 1. The last index is going to be the number of spikes. So basically from 1 to whatever number of spikes we have, we're going to do this following logic. We're going to loop that body. So for number of spikes, say if we have 3 in there, it's going to do from 1 to 3. And then it's going to basically run it 3 times essentially. But right now we'll leave it at 1. And what we're going to do first from this loop body is add a static mesh component. And obviously we need to add our static mesh for the spike. So I'm going to go to my content folder. I'm just going to pick SM bloody spike 01 and right click here, add component, common, add SM bloody spike 01, static mesh component. Throw that in there. And then what we need to do now is set the relative location and rotation. So from the return value here, let's just do that. Set relative location and rotation. I believe by now we'll have something spawned. And we do. So what we need to do first is get its rotation correct. So what we need to do is set R to 90. Compile, and it's going to flip up like that. And as we can see, things aren't matching correctly here, where these are too far to the right. So what we need to do, this one's going to be interesting. You grab the index here, and we'll multiply it by float, and we'll do it by 50. And then we're going to throw that to a make vector. We're going to remain it in the X, and then we're going to throw the return value back in there into the new location. Compile, and now it matches. And what this does, basically it takes the index, multiplies it by 50. So the index is going to be whichever one we're looping through. So if it's one spike, it's going to be 1 times 50. If it's the second spike, it's going to be 2 times 50, 3 times 50, 4 times, all the way through each body. So to give you a better look at that, if we do number of spikes, we'll do 2. It creates another one. We do 3, 4, 5, 10 if we can. It goes up to, yep, there we go. So it does it correctly. It's spawning those objects, which is always a good thing. It's always good to see that working on the first try. And then what we're going to do next is this return value again. We're gonna pull it down. I'm going to do a reroute node just for organizational purposes here. But what we're going to do is add these guys to an array. So let's right click and type in add. We'll plug that in. And then the return value that we just created here, this reroute node, we'll plug that into the bottom node here. But now we need an array. So let's pull from that array and we'll do a promote to variable. And I'll call this spike array. That way we can just add all the spikes that we have here into a nice little array. That way we can also, if they all need to do something as a group, we can do that easily with this array, like change the material, change the collision, what have you. So now, we're going to do a couple things now. Basically, this is where it gets a little bit wonky, at least for my purposes, because we have the spike damage collision and the normal collision. But based on the normal stuff that we want to do, which is spawning number of spikes, that's done. That's right here working. But what I want to do is scale both these volumes so that, because what I have them do in the end is kill the player if you land on them. So I'm just going to show you how I did that. What I first do, because of the way we're doing the logic here, the first spike is special compared to the other ones. So let's grab this index. Let's do a reroute node here. Again, this is just organizational purposes, nothing more than that. But we're going to check if this is equal to 1. Let's see if this is the first index. And then we're going to pull a branch from that. So if it is, what we're going to do, we're going to grab our spike damage collision, and we're going to do a set relative scale 3D. I like to break up the struck pin here, and I'm just going to set them all to 1. And we're going to plug that into the true, because we are dealing with the fact that this is the first spike. And then we're going to do another logical thing here with the spike damage collision. We're going to set relative location or add relative location. Again, I like to break the struck pin. So let's right click on that, split struck pin. And we're going to leave that default 0, 0, 0. We don't want to add any new locations to it. In general, we may not even need this logic for the first one, but it's nice to have in general, just so you can look at it. And then we're going to do the same 2 pieces of logic here. So let's just copy and paste that, but we're going to change the variable that it's doing it to. Instead of it doing the spike damage collision, it's going to do the spike normal collision. We can compile that. Again, we're not going to see any changes. Again, if we just make this 2, we see no scaling just yet. This gets done from the false. So what we can do, since we are messing with the same 2 pieces of information, we can just copy these 4 nodes, bring them down just a tad bit, plug the false up here, but this is where the math gets a little weird. So what I need to do is grab the index again, so I'm going to pull it down, add a reroute node for organizational purposes here. And we're going to have to do a little bit of math, because what we want is the scale of both the normal collision and the damage collision to increase in the x as we add spikes. So what we're going to do first is multiply this by a float. Again, this is an arbitrary number that I found that worked best for me, and it's 1.45. Then what I do is I grab the index again, and I need to convert it to a float. And I'm going to add these 2 floats together. And then I'm going to minus this result by 1. And this will go into the scale of the damage collision in the x. So basically, we're taking, so for the number 1, it's kind of redundant logic here, where we take the number 1, multiply it by 1.45, add it by 1, and then subtract 1. And then we do it for 2, we do it for 3, we do it for 4. In the end, it does work, so I'm going to leave it to that. Again, this is an arbitrary number. It's what I use that worked best for me. And then for add relative location, we know the size of the box collision here, for both of them, or at least, is going to be 25. So for the x for add relative location, we're going to make this 25. Everything else remains the same. And then what we do for set relative scale 3D for the spike normal collision is we just take the index. Actually, we already have a conversion here to a flow. We just plug that in. For the spike normal collision, we just need the index number as a multiplier for the scale. And then for the add relative location, again, we do 25. So let's compile. So now, if we do the number of spikes and we make this 2, we see them scale. If we make this 4, we see it scale. Make it 10, we see it scale. So it's exactly what we want. The only thing now what we're going to do, if you'll notice, is the HUD. It kind of stays on the far left. I kind of want it to stay central. So what we can do is grab our hazard HUD that's inherited there. You can grab it under Components and Hazard HUD. We could do an add relative location as well. Break the struct here. Put X as 25. Look that up. And now, if we make number of spikes 2, we see it then moves. And it kind of gets centralized. 25 might not be the best number. You know, we could make it 15. Just play with it, in all honesty. Maybe 20 would be the best. Yeah, 20 works. So that's pretty much it. The last thing I'm going to really do here, because with the spikes, right now they're all bloody. We want them to be the clean spikes, and I see the default sag mesh has the blood on it. So what we can do to easily change that is from the completed for that for loop, we can then do a for each loop. And if you remember, we made that spike array. So we put in that array, and then for each one, what we can do, grab the target from array element, we can do set material. And I can just go into my content browser, go to my materials, go to my spikes here, and I have the normal spike, so let me plug that up. And the last thing I gotta do is, because the collision is on the static mesh, what I can do, I can either turn that off in the static mesh itself, or I could just do it in the construction script. So I'm going to do it here in the construction script. What I can do for the array element is just pull that out, do set collision enabled. By default, it's no collision, and I can just plug that up. And now, if I go to the viewport, they're all normal. And that's pretty much it. So now I can just grab that blueprint. So again, it was the master child. I could just go into my level here, put it on this platform. I can just throw that in, and then because I made those variables public, I can make that 1, I can make it 5, I can make it 10. If I need more than 10, I can change the max number to 20, and then make this 20. And then yeah, it covers it all. So that's going to be it for this tutorial. It was a little weird, the numbers that I had to use and the logic behind what I'm doing, just because it is specific to my project. But just the base of making objects spawn, like this section right here, pretty straightforward. All you do is loop the body, add the static mesh component, give it a relative location or rotation, and if you need to, add it to an array so you can call each element. All this other logic here is just specific to the collision that I want. And now, if I just jump in, I can just jump onto this guy. Obviously, there's no collision right now for the spike damage collision or anything like that, or the normal collision. Like for the normal collision, I could just do block all, and then I could just jump back in. And now I'm walking on them, and then from there you can add damage, you can do whatever you want. I just don't have that logic into this spike that we just created. It is in this spike section down here. So if I just play and jump on this guy, and there you go. So again, I do hope you learned a lot. If you did enjoy this video and you haven't subscribed yet, just click on me. But you know, you'll see that in the next few moments anyway. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, I hope you did enjoy that video. If you haven't already and you're not subscribed, please click on me or the subscribe button above to subscribe to the Devin Level Design channel. If you did like the content, please like it, share it, comment with any suggestions that you have, any problems you may occur with. On the right here, this right, yeah, is more videos. You can check out more blueprint examples, you can check out more tutorials, you can do all that good stuff. And you can also follow me on Instagram, you can friend me on Facebook if you want. Follow me on Twitter, all that good stuff. All that's in the description. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!